Legislative session is wrapping up. I will say, as we unfortunately expected, many of our bills had a very, very tough time in the House. But what this does is it gives us the opportunity to message when we get to the elections this year about who voted for what and who was in support of what issues, right? So we are going to be working on that from the coalition's perspective, but I do have one good piece of news that our bill on teacher compensation passed both the Senate and the House unanimously. So teachers will be getting more funding, which is so critically important, as we know, in our public school system. And I do have one last call to action to share with you, and it is for a bill that would provide better mental health resources to schools. This one is still in the House Appropriations Committee and really could use your support. So as you are hearing our presentation on the Power Lunch, please take action on that call to action. There are also a couple of other environmental bills that we are tracking, but we are trying to determine the best way to get involved. So please make sure that you are signed up for STARE's emails and my emails. Those may be things where we're going to need you to take action during the conference where the bills are going to be reconciled between the two houses, or it might be other action that needs to be taken more at the executive level. So we are tracking that and we'll let you know as soon as we have the clear strategy going forward. I do want to transition because, as we know, this is a big election year in Virginia, and we have a big election coming up on Tuesday, February 21st. I want to encourage everyone, if you have not already, to find a way to support Jennifer McClellan's race. I'm putting in the chat opportunities for text banking, phone banking, canvassing for McClellan. It's really important that we are keeping up the momentum through these special elections in Virginia to keep people and voters engaged, because we have a ton of primaries coming up and we want to make sure that they are listening. They know that their voice is really, really important this year. There's also, and I think someone already put it in the chat, the special election in Wisconsin, or maybe it's just a election in general for the Supreme Court. It's a primary, and we're trying to also in Wisconsin with other groups across the country just get out the vote there. Isn't necessarily a weigh in on who you should vote for, but just to know that the election does exist. And so the last thing I want to remind people is we do have elections coming up for the whole state House and Senate, which I'm sure you've heard multiple times for this year. But it does mean that even prior to the general election, we have a lot of Democrats running against other Democrats in primaries. And the one thing that I've been doing when I get approached by candidates who are running in a contested primary, I ask a couple questions. The first is, what are you trying to accomplish through this race, even if you're not going to be able to win the primary? So why are you in this race to start with? Because the one thing I'm trying to gauge is, are you just out there to tear someone else down, or do you really have something that you're adding? Are you adding the ability to reach new voters? Are you adding a new perspective on, how you would approach legislative strategy? Are you adding the fact that you have a particular lived experience that you feel is missing and needs to be, needs representation? So they need to be able to articulate that. Secondly, I always ask, if you don't win the primary, will you be all in for whoever does? And I want to hear that specifically, because the fact is, it doesn't help us if we put a lot of energy into a primary race and then you as a candidate who didn't win step back and don't want to get involved in the general election. Our overall goal, as we all know, is to be flipping seats and to be flipping our House blue and increasing our lead in the state Senate. And if you are not all in on those general elections, that doesn't serve our, the overall party's goals. So I think those are some of the things I'm looking at. If you have the opportunity to talk to some candidates, think about what are your talking points and where do you want to push them to think about how are they using their primary race in a way that is going to best serve the party as a whole going forward. And that's why I'm, challenging everyone to think through, like, what role do you want to play, right? It could be that you want to work on particular campaigns. It could be that you want to be working on getting out the vote, which is really, not necessarily choosing one side or another, but saying we just need more people to be weighing in on these primary elections. As we know, not many people come out and vote in primaries. And what happens is it's usually people who have more extreme views on both sides of the aisle who tend to come out for primary elections. We would be better served if we had more people who have, views across the spectrum voting in our primaries. And so lots of different ways to get involved. What it does say is all of these seats, you have to run for your seat. And it's going to remind those, legislators who have been in those seats for a long time, you're not safe anymore because it's been changed, right? Your districting lines are different. People who are voting for you are different. And you need to come back out and convince voters why you should be the one who continues to represent them. And I think that that's really, it's a good thing, right? We need to be, I don't want to call it cleaning house, but it really is reminding people that they are representing specific individuals and they need to continue making sure that they are talking to those individuals, hearing what their concerns are, and figuring out the best way to represent them in Richmond.